Okay, y'all, let's go ahead and talk watercolors. Those of you in 7th grade, you'll be working with these types of watercolors. Those of you in 6th grade have already been provided with watercolors, and you each have a set. Now, you also have one of these papers, okay? These worksheets are thicker, and they're made of a watercolor paper, so it should hold up pretty well. And we're going to go ahead and get started. Now, when you're looking at your paintbrush, you have the 3 parts. You have the brush right up here, the handle, and you have the ferrule. You want to make sure that you're not soaking it too much, or else it ends up very wobbly, just like this. I can still use this one, but make sure that you're not doing that with it, because then you end up with paintbrushes that do this. That's not what you need. I can still use this one because I know what I'm doing, but this is not what you want for your paintbrushes. Now, the first thing you're going to do is you're going to go ahead and add a little bit of water to the color that you are going to use. Okay, so the one, even though it says dry brush, it's not actually talking completely dry. Because if you just try to take a watercolor and you don't have any water on the brush, I don't care what kind of paintbrush you're using, if there's no water on the brush, if there's no ink, it's not going to do anything. Okay? So you want to go ahead and add a little bit of water, just a few drops, to your paint first. Okay? What it means by a dry brush technique is not that your paint is not wet, is that the brush itself has been dried a little bit before you actually paint with it. So take a little paper towel. I'm going to grab one right now. Get a little paper towel. And you're going to go ahead and just dab off whatever excess water is there. And then you're going to go ahead and get your brush and gently brush the bristles over the top of the paint. And then brush. The technique for the dry brush technique allows you to make specific lines and textures in your artwork, including using things like cross hatching. Now, the next one is wet on dry. That is when your paper is dry and you have a wet brush, wet paint, and you're working and filling the space just like so. Okay, so the next one would be to clean your brush. You should all have water on your table. You're going to dry your brush. Okay, you're going to get just water and you're going to fill up the space first with just a little bit of water. You're not soaking it, you're just dampening the paper. I'm going to go ahead and lift this up so you can see. Now, if there's too much water, you can take a little bit of paper towel and damp it like that. You want to be able to see it wet, but not soaking. Next, you're going to pick up a little bit of paint. You're just going to touch it to the wet paper. And what's going to happen is if the paper is wet enough, it's going to spread. And you can see it starting to spread right there. Now, in this case, the paper is a little bit drier than I'd like. So I'm going to go ahead and add just a little bit more more water to the paper. And this creates that effect that everybody's used to when you hear the term watercolor, for it to spread out and move. So I'm going to go ahead and create that tie-dye effect. I'm going to go ahead and pick up a little bit of red so you can actually see the difference in the combinations. And just smear it out. Now, if you can add more water, you can add more colors. That's up to you. And you can just dab it into the space. That creates that tie-dye effect that everybody's used to when listening to about watercolors. The next one is the hard edge. So the hard edge is when you use the tip to create and tip your paintbrush off to the side. This is going to create a hard line when you're using it. So pick up a little bit of paint. You can wipe it on the edge. And you're going to go ahead and tilt your paintbrush off to the side. And it's going to create a clean, crisp line. Now, the soft edge would be to use a little bit less of the tip and a little bit more of the side. And that is mostly you turn the paintbrush to the side, just sort of drag it. It makes for a more wide line. Now next you have drop on wet. So for this one, you're going to fill the paper with a little bit of water. Now you're seeing the paintbrush right here bend sideways. That is because this one was damaged. I'm using it anyway just so you guys can actually see how it works. So next you're going to go ahead and just drop it in to a really wet section. You see how it spreads itself out into the water? You could add more water, spread it out. So this one you would want it to be really nice and wet. Okay? And just fill it in with water, pick up color, and just tap it into the water and let it spread and move. It creates a very similar effect to the wet on wet, but it's not quite exactly the same. The next one is the resist. So I'm going to go ahead and pause here for a second. Okay, so for this next one, this one's going to be a wax resist. I'm going to use this pink crayon just so you guys can see it on camera. And what you're going to do is you're going to just draw a shape of your choice. I'm going to fill it in with the crayon. Just so you guys can really see the difference. That's why I chose this one. So I'm going to go ahead and get more of the watercolor, and then I'm just going to paint directly over it. And what you're going to see is that where the wax is from the crayon, it doesn't want to stick. So then you can go ahead and just wipe off the excess, and it leaves your design behind. So speaking of wiping off the excess, this is where blotting comes into the picture. So you can just go ahead for this one and just fill up the space with watercolor, get a piece of paper towel, and just kind of tap it. And what's going to happen is you get a much lighter color. Now for the next one, you are going to use more water to lighten the color and less water to darken the color. So we're going to go ahead and add a lot of water here into the watercolor. You're going to go ahead and start filling it in. As you move it across, it should automatically start getting lighter. So you're going to pick up more color and you're going to do it again. Over. More color. Start at the dark and work your way over to the lights. Now, in order to thin it back out and make it much lighter over here, we're going to just pick up water and we're going to move our way back towards the other side with just water on the brush. And then you're going to pick up more color again, and you're going to go back up towards that other side. More color, back up. And as you move it over, it's going to start getting lighter and lighter as you go across. Now, if you want to get it extra dark, because there's only so dark the green's going to go, we're going to go ahead and use this moment to pick up a slightly darker color, in this case, the blue. And we're going to go in on that darkest spot and just start adding a little bit of blue, because that is the next color on the gradient. So you want to get a little bit darker. Move your way around the color wheel. You see how it goes from dark to light? That's what you want to accomplish. Now, again, you're going to work your way slowly across the color wheel. So this next one, we're going to do the same thing, but we're going to go from one color to the other color. So in this particular case, I want to go ahead and start with red. And work my way over towards the center. Then I'm going to pick up some, I'm going to clean my brush really, really well. And I'm going to pick up yellow. Do not use complementary colors. Make sure your colors are something that can blend together. I highly recommend using a primary for this one. And I'm going to pick up yellow and work my way over towards the center. And this is where I'm going to blend over on top of the other color. And it should turn into this color, the blended color in the center. You want to try and create a smooth transition from one color to the next. For this next one, this is where we're going to go. This one's going to be a little bit more tricky because this one's going to actually focus on what you already know. So a reminder, you're going to go ahead and use this as your lights. You're going to be using the warm colors for your highlights and cool colors for your shadows. So here's going to be the shadow and here's going to be the highlight. Now, the next one, I'm going to let you paint this one on your own. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and remind you that the highlights should always follow the curves of your objects. So I highly recommend your brightest color goes here and you work your way darker. Remember, in order to get darker, you work your way around the color wheel. I repeat, for this assignment, I do not want you to be using black. And if you have any questions, feel free to ask.